from the industry standard, we also understand that human interpreters, there's certain interpretation scenarios that AI will never be able to replace.
So you want to make an impact. You're thinking about starting a business, sharing your voice. How do women do it that handle motherhood, family, and still chase after those dreams? Well, listen each week as we dive into the stories of women who know. This is Call Me CEO. Welcome back, everyone, to Call Me CEO. This is your host, Camille Walker, and here we share mothers building businesses and making impressionable, amazing life choices that sometimes don't seem like they are the path that we choose in the beginning, but we are led to pivots and changes that take us where we actually need to go. And so today we are going to be having a powerful reminder of that story through Dr. Nelva Lee. She is the founder and CEO of Interpret AI. After years of hospital administration, she decided that she saw a critical gap in communication and language access. And instead of ignoring it, she built a solution. And so in this episode, we're going to talk about what a traditional career can look like to pivoting to entrepreneurship and the bumps of motherhood and how that all comes together. And I'm so thrilled to have Dr. Nelva Lee on the episode today. So grateful to have you, Dr. Nelva Lee. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Camille.
Yeah, so we got to know each other a little bit before we started recording. And I love that your story is so much about helping people thinking you're going into hospital administration, which is a huge job, huge, stressful corporate job from the very little I know about it. And then saying, okay, I'm going to pivot this and actually having it help you out a lot in your life and especially with your family and all the demands that you have on you. So please tell us a little bit more about you, where you're from, and how this journey got started.
Definitely. Well, again, thank you for having me today. So a little bit about my background. I decided very early on in high school that I loved hospitals. I used to volunteer every weekend at a hospital, and I wanted to work there. So I thought the solution was to become a nurse. And so I started my college career in nursing school. But then, because I had obtained my nurse's aide certification in high school, knowing that I was going to, go to nursing school, I was, talking to different nurses who were my coworkers and realized how little agency nurses had. And so I changed my major to healthcare administration. And the goal was to be a hospital CEO one day, hospital president. And so I was working my way up. After college, I got my bachelor's and then my master's in healthcare administration. And I had been hired as a director of patient advocacy at the Grady Health System, which is a large public hospital in Grady. And I was working my way up the ladder. And one of the programs in my department was interpreting services. And at the time, this was in the early 2000s, we realized that there was very little really qualified interpreting training programs in Georgia. So they would have them, in California or up in Boston, but not so much in the state of Georgia. And I wanted to have, a solution to this problem. Went to the CEO of Grady at the time and shared my idea to start a training program. He passed on it, but I decided to start my own. I had already been an adjunct professor and I had been trained in curriculum development. At the time, I was teaching healthcare administration as an adjunct. And I decided to start my own interpreting training program. And so I started it in 2004. And just at that time, my son, who was 2, going on 3 years old at the time, he started exhibiting autism symptoms. He was brilliant, very high IQ, but socially had some difficulties. And I really had kind of like a come to Jesus moment and realized that he needed more of my time, more time with his mom. And so it turned out that in retrospect, really, because hindsight is 2020.
Right.
In retrospect, it was the perfect solution for him, for me to be able to step back and work from home and start my own business at the very same time. And so I started.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, so just so people may not understand what interpretive services are, what that means, can you describe that a little bit more for us?
Definitely. So if you go to a hospital and you don't speak the language, or even if you speak the language passively to get by, but when you go to a hospital setting, you want the doctors to understand what you're saying because
Hmm.
it's a life or death situation. And so here in the US, it's a requirement for hospitals to use qualified interpreters. So you can't just say, hey, who speaks this language? Because
Right.
it's not just about being bilingual, it's also about knowing medical jargon. It's also not about
Which
knowing
is its own
confidential.
language in for
Exactly.
everyone. Yeah.
Exactly. Medical language is its own language. And also you have to know confidentiality rules, HIPAA
Mm,
laws, et cetera. You have to know proper cadence, interpreters know when to stop a provider and say, hey, I need to be able to interpret this now in order for me to be accurate. So it's a whole training program involved in becoming an interpreter. We have to qualify you that you're actually proficient, intermediate or above in the languages that you're claiming to interpret, both English and your target language. And then you have to have gone through a training program. And so that is what I provided in
wow.
the state of Georgia for the industry.
So you started that business in 2004. And
Correct.
was there a
What?
specific time you say that your son, you found out that he had autism or that you were thinking that that was possibly what
Correct.
was happening? Was there a specific moment that you made that pivot and what was that like? Was that hard for you to
It was
decide?
it was incredibly hard. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It was a very
Yeah.
difficult decision. So not only was my family faced with going from a two income to one income, right? Because
Hmm.
starting a business is it's not like you just start making the same amount of money that you were making at your job, right?
Yeah.
Initially, and then I had to also um, just it was just a very difficult decision because personally, my goal was to become the CEO of a hospital someday. It
Since you were in
wasn't
high
to
school. Yeah.
exactly. It
Yeah.
wasn't to it wasn't to be a stay-at-home mom. It wasn't to, be start up my own business. That was not the goal. And so these were all life changes that were coming at me very quickly. But I really I want to tell your listeners I always lean into guidance from my heavenly Father. And so I really prayed about it. My husband and I prayed about it, and had a peace about making the
Mhm.
decision, even though we had to start skimping on different things. When you have a smaller budget, you have to start looking at ways to save money. And so we had to do all of those things
Yeah.
initially.
Well, and I would think because the intimate way that you knew and understood how a hospital ran, you were able to create a business for this service that most people wouldn't understand. Would you agree with
Correct.
that?
Definitely. So I was the recipient of this need, right? While I
Mm,
was a director. And so I knew exactly what was needed. I knew exactly what the training program had to come, the components were needed to have a successful interpreter. But also because I had been trained in curriculum development. All of those skill sets came into play when I started this business.
what gaps did you see in this service and knowing that it needed better, that people deserved a better service?
Right. So as I mentioned, there were already exceptional schools in the West Coast and Northeast, but not so much in the South. And so this was in the early 2000s. I like to say that I started a trend because when I started the online program, most in the industry were like, you can't teach this online because most of the programs were in person. And so I
Mm,
was able to dispel that. We used Skype at the time and then transitioned over
yeah.
to Zoom afterwards. But they realized that our interpreters, once they completed the program, passed the certification exams, at a higher rate than others. And so we were
Mm,
able to prove that we were doing an exceptional job. So it was a very rigorous program. And I created it as a college level program because I had been trained by universities for curriculum development. So a lot of the programs that were really good were not college level material. So I made sure that we had textbooks. I made sure that they had to complete essays and all of that, in addition to the live practice sessions. So it was a very rigorous program.
developing that program probably took a lot of editing and back and forth of
Oh, yes.
making sure you covered all of your bases. Did you have other team members involved to help you write curriculum? Because I mean, I have an education background, and writing lesson plans is one thing, but then writing a curriculum for an like a professional level career, that's very challenging. How were you able to manage all of that?
So I wrote it as if it was a college level course. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, I had already been developing college programs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always use the textbook as the basis. And then I go from there and then I fill in around it. And so I use the textbook as the basis for the reading material that they had to complete, the assignments, the writing assignments that they had to complete. And then I also made sure from the industry perspective that they had the live practice sessions that were required for the industry. I made sure that we provided the qualifications, the language qualifications. So I had I outsourced that to actual companies that's all they do is qualify languages. And so we put all these things in place, and it was a very comprehensive program. So there were no gaps because of that. I knew what the industry required because I had worked alongside my interpreters, and they knew
Mm-hmm.
what the industry required. And I knew from a college level what I wanted my students to go through, the rigor that I wanted them to go through.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. I mean, all those pieces come together where that background is invaluable, right?
Correct.
Would you say you talked about your son and discovering that he needed more of your attention and time?
Correct.
How did you make that transition and how did you make it? I mean, it's just that age old. How did you balance it all with
Right.
his needs and building this new business, going from CEO to business owner CEO? I mean, there's a lot going on here. So,
Right.
what were some of those challenges and solutions that you found in that time?
I can honestly say that working from home on the business was a lot less challenging than my job as the director
Mm,
at the hospital. Oh yeah, my job as a director at a very busy public hospital
yeah.
was very intense. So I would leave. I used to drop my son off early in the morning. My husband would pick him up from daycare, and I wouldn't get to see him till 7, 8 o'clock at night, oftentimes. And they would love to. My quit time was 5 o'clock, but it was always, oh, we have a meeting, a pop up meeting at 5.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was my life prior to starting my business. So when I tell you that starting my own business and working from home was a godsend because now he had his mom.
Yeah.
And so even though I was working, he was right there. And so I could stop whatever I was doing, tend to him if needed. And so it was much more flexible solution. And I'm a type A type of person. Working from home doesn't work for everyone,
Yeah.
right? But if you are a self-motivated person and you have, you know, you're like a list checker, I love checking things off my list. If I have to get things done, I get them done. Even if it means once he's gone to bed, I can still work a little bit. So it
How
works
old?
out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How old was he when you transitioned from the
He
hospital
was
to
still
starting
he
your
was a
own?
toddler. He was
Okay.
2 going on 3. Hmm.
Okay. So busy time, but you were able to kind of sort that out. Not kind of, you were, because yeah,
Yes, yes.
type A, I'm like, okay, you know how to work hard with
Oh,
all of your
correct.
background and everything that you have going on. So it really shouldn't come as a surprise that you're like, yeah, actually, this was easier for me. I
It
was
was.
running a whole hospital.
It was. It was
Yeah.
for sure.
So what would you say? I want to transition a little bit into what your business offers now, but then
Correct.
I want to go into some of your time saving and balancing act just for our listeners to kind of get a feel for what things that have worked for you that may work for them. So tell
For
us a
sure.
little bit more now that you've moved on from that coursework into something different because that
Yes,
evolved too. Tell us about that evolve
it did.
time and then what it looks like now.
So the evolution happened because so many of my alumni were having difficulty finding remote work. So as an interpreter, you can work either in person at a hospital, right, which
Mm-hmm.
is what I was used to, or you can work remotely because a lot of remote agencies, like the one that I currently have, we hire people from all over, nationwide,
Cool.
and they're able to just log in when they want to work, and they're able to provide an excellent service, either phone or video interpreting, right? And so many of my alumni had asked, why don't you start your own agency? And enough of them asked that I eventually started that agency in 2017. And because of, in the aftermath of COVID and with Google ads changing the algorithms, long story short, we ended up transitioning away from providing courses as our main business to providing the agency. And our agency is Interpret AI. And so we have AI kind of start the general type of communication, and then our clients can switch over to a human interpreter.
So smart. I'm like, imagine those people that are like, you can't do this online, to now so many people, that's all we do. Where it just goes
Exactly.
to say that people, the naysayers, they're not the one directing and knowing really what's going on down the line, right? Or what
Correct.
your impressions are to follow your heart and what you need to be right.
That is correct.
So, how would you say your leadership style has evolved from being a hospital admin to now running this business?
I would say that I've always had leadership skills, really strong leadership skills. I've definitely honed them through the years. I take a lot of leadership courses and I read a lot of leadership books. But switching over, very early on from nursing school to healthcare administration was in kind of a nod to my leadership skills, because I knew that I wanted to be in a position where I was providing solutions, because I've always been a creative, problem solver, and recognizing that talent and those natural leadership skill sets that I've had has always been something that I've tried to lean into my strengths.
Yeah.
So for sure. And so transitioning to becoming a CEO in some ways was pretty seamless, from being, being a director at a hospital. But in other ways, when you first start a business, you're basically wearing multiple hats, right? So there's no delegating going on at the beginning.
Yeah.
So you are doing everything on your own, and knowing when to delegate, and knowing, okay, this job has outgrown my capabilities at this point and I have to delegate, is very important for solopreneurs when they start and they believe that they have to do everything, and knowing when to delegate and when to let go is so important.
Can you think of a time that happened with the growth of, especially with starting the agency, that happened and how you were able to handle that?
Right. I had to start delegating prior to starting the agency. So one of the things that I took pride in was those live sessions that I mentioned, because that was like an industry standard. And so I would do them myself for many years. But it was such like a scheduled time that it didn't provide for a lot of flexibility. But I was able to figure out exactly what I did. So I did like a job description, just detailing every single thing that I did during those live sessions, and provided that, started hiring some of my alumni to do them. And because they had gone through the process, they knew what it looked like, because I had directed them the live sessions myself. And so I trained them and sat in on a few of their live sessions. And I'm like, okay, you got it. And until this day, I still have alumni, that did those live sessions. Now, moving over to the Interpret AI, that was really just recognizing where the industry was going. So we all, you can fear technology, you can fear changes, or you can embrace it, right? And so that's what we decided to do. So we knew that the industry was going to adopt and embrace AI at some point, but from the industry standard, we also understand that human interpreters, there's certain interpretation scenarios that AI will never be able to replace. So primarily things dealing with culture, uh, dealing with children, or those that have other types of mental or learning disabilities. You're never going to have a machine to be able to replace a human in those situations. And so being able to marry the two is so important. And who best to do that than those that are in the industry?
Yeah. I like that you bring that up because I think that you're right that many times, especially there are so many even service providers. My husband runs a law firm and he even talks about, paralegals or things that attorneys do that now AI can do in a pinch. Or
Right.
there's a lot of fear around it. And I think that, like you're saying, you have to put yourself in a position where you're willing to change and flow and move with those pivots and that change and say, well, this is the future of how this is going, so we need to embrace it.
Right. And I think if you embrace it from the industry standpoint, then you're not taken over by someone that doesn't really understand your industry. So if,
Mm,
say, for example, your husband's law firm, if they decided, okay, we're going to allow these things to be done by AI, you can do it right from our website. And then when you realize that you need an actual lawyer or an actual paralegal, you're right there, and
right.
we can pick up where that was not able to provide you the best service at that point.
Hmm. Can you tell me a time, maybe one of the hardest moments of transitioning in your entrepreneurial journey and how you moved through it?
Well, I would say when I first started the program, just getting explained to the industry why an online program was needed, because they were
Mm,
so used to doing it in person for so long. But then nobody was moving to Georgia to provide us with the training. So, explain to them that in places like Utah or even in places like California, they would have very few in person training programs. So people had to drive 4 hours just to get to them. So an online program was needed. And so that is and once they realized that it was a very rigorous program, that the naysayers stopped. But initially it was just convincing the industry. So
right.
you might really believe in something, but convincing those that are used to doing things the way that they've always done it, it can be a bit daunting sometimes.
Mm. When you are faced with indecision as a leader,
Mhm.
as a mother, what are some of the ways that you help yourself to make decisions?
So you mentioned earlier, what are some of my tricks of the trade,
Yes,
if
let's
you
get
will?
into it. I would love
Right,
to
right.
hear.
So I love this book called The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Covey,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you've
I'm
probably read it.
familiar. Yes.
Gotcha. And in it, he talks about the four quadrants, right? So whether something's important but not urgent, important but urgent, not important but urgent, not important, not urgent, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you put things in those quadrants and it really helps your decision making. If you can sit down ahead of time before you're faced with a crisis and put things in their proper quadrants and prioritize what it is that you want in those quadrants, then when you're faced with a decision, you can just go through that really quickly and say, really, how important is this? And is it something that I absolutely have to do now versus something that I can put off for later? And and I can tell you, the clincher. Okay, so many people believe that everything is urgent,
Mm-hmm.
but really it isn't. And this is a way to decide if something is truly urgent. If you were faced with a cancer diagnosis, God forbid, how urgent is this? And
Mm,
that will tell you whether it's truly urgent. Because we often think that everything that comes on our plate or comes through our desk is urgent, but it really isn't. And so I really highly recommend your readers, your listeners to read that book. It really changed my life, and I read it early on. I read it in my early 20s, and it just guided the way that I operate for life. So that really helps with my decision making. And as I mentioned, also just really leaning into prayer. I believe that I'm guided by my higher power, and like my relationship with God is very important to me, and it definitely guides a lot of the decisions. It helps me figure out what's truly important.
yeah. Oh, I love
Mhm.
that. I'm curious if you've ever read The Eighth Habit. He
I
wrote
have
another one
not.
called The Eighth Habit. You should check it out if you like
Okay.
that one. There's also one called Highly Effective Habits for Teens. If any of you are listening and have teenagers and want to check that out, an amazing series. So I'm curious, with that one being your favorite, do you listen to it or read it once a year, or do you feel like you have it memorized at this point? How often do you like check back in?
So this is one of the things that I do. So if you ever have a staff, read it with your staff. And so I've
Mm,
done this several times with a group of staff members. And so we'll get an audio book and just kind of read 10 to 15 minutes, until we've gone through the entire book, and just kind of do discussions afterwards. And I truly believe that if you invest in your staff growth, that it reciprocates, because they believe that you are not just, their boss, but also invested in their growth, right? And so whether or not they stay with you or move on, it becomes like a partnership, if you will. And so they want to give more of themselves and more of their time, because they believe that you're invested in their growth. So this is a really good book to invest in your
yeah.
staff's growth.
Yeah, that's a great tip too. Not just for yourself, but to have it as a leader and for your team. I love that. What do you think about in terms of I always love to ask this question and you are the perfect person for this, but do you have a morning and evening routine or something that helps to refuel you for your day or at the end of week? What practices do you do?
I do. I have what my perfect day looks like, and I try to hit, like, I have like 5 to 7 things on what my perfect day would look like. If I had a perfect day, what would it include? And I try to do at least 5 of those every day. And so that's prayer, meditation, eating healthy, exercising, getting a good night's sleep,
Mhm.
having some quality time with my spouse and my children. And so if I can, my perfect day includes that. And as you can see, it had nothing to do with work. And so if you are a person that, I'm assuming everyone that's listening to this podcast loves to work, right? It gets passion and fuel from that. So the reason I don't include work in there, because it's going to happen, right? I
Mm.
don't have to put that in there. So my perfect day has to do with things that are going to energize me to do that work. It's going to fuel me. It's going to give me meaning, and then the work is going to happen regardless, right?
That's
Um, and,
really I've never heard someone say it like that before, but it's so true because you're like, you're it's either you're obligated to do it or you do it because you love it, you like it, it's going to happen. So it's like filling in the gaps of, but what makes me feel more alive and more purposeful in my everyday?
and it actually allows me to do my work better,
For
by the way,
sure. Yes.
because I'm not super stressed because of the meditation and the prayer and the workouts, right? And eating healthy. All of these things actually allows me to be a better CEO, a better boss,
I love that.
and a better mom.
For sure. Yeah. I was
Right.
actually going to ask you, what is some of the best advice you've ever received that's been impactful?
Oh gosh, I've received so much. I believe in surrounding yourself with people that you honor, that you believe that have done it better, right? Or
Mm.
are doing it well, that are kind of a few steps a bit ahead of you. And so I've always surrounded myself with older women that have children that, are older than mine, and they're doing great. I'm like, okay, I want to know what they did, how they did that. And so I'm constantly, surrounding myself with mentors. So I highly recommend that. And I also have those that I mentee,
Yeah.
my mentees rather. And so I have this group called Soul Sisters, and we basically meet every Saturday morning. And like I said, there's some that are much older than me and a few that are younger than me. And we meet to walk 3 to 4 miles a week, but we also pray for each other and share
Mm.
life with each other. And so I can tell you that I have gotten so much invaluable advice and support from that group. So I would say that's my other little tip
Oh,
for
I
getting
love that.
through
So
life. Yes,
are you meeting digitally to walk or it's in person?
it's in person. Yes.
Impressive. And what
So
time
we
are we
meet
meeting on Saturday mornings?
7:30 every morning. So we walk for a good, I would say normally it's about 4 miles. Sometimes we do a little bit more. So
Oh, I love that.
yes.
That's really neat. And would you say that is this a group that you put together or is it something that organically happened or who put it together?
So initially, it was my church kind of encouraged us to start little groups where we could meet informally outside
Mhm.
of church. And it just grew where we're not, it's just not one church. It's like several several of us are from different churches, and
Cool.
yeah, so it's kind of grown that way. So we'll invite people to join us. Oftentimes, ladies will just show up just for the prayer. We have had so many prayers answered. It's amazing.
Oh, that warms my
Yeah.
heart. I'm like loving that idea. That is so cool.
Like, can I live in Georgia so I can join
I
this?
know. I'm like, I want to show up. That's amazing. That is so cool. So now that you're at this part in your life, I mean, you're really at a pinnacle of success. Has it changed how you see yourself in terms of going from more of a corporate role to now business owner? How do you see yourself and has that changed?
Me a while, Camille, to let go of that goal to want to be CEO of a hospital. I mean, even though I started my business, I still, thought, well, one day I'll go back and,
Hmm.
climb up the ladder. It was very long process before I was just like, I'm a business owner, and just kind of fully embraced it. Being very, vulnerable and transparent with your listeners. But once I did, I just, completely owned it. Like this. Yes, this is who I am, and I'm a business owner, and I'm proud to do that. But now, as you know, I'm also running for superintendent of schools in the state of Georgia. So I'm wearing another hat, which is politician on top of that. So
You
that's
wouldn't
fun.
happen to be an Enneagram 3, would you? Have you taken your Enneagram test before?
I have. It's been a while, so I don't even remember what it
Okay, I'm
what
guessing 1 or 3 because you're like,
Okay.
if I can add a hat, I'm adding it and I'm going to do it the best that I can. That's
Yes.
amazing. So tell me a little bit more. What was your drive to run for office?
My experience with vocational schools. So when I was in high school, as I mentioned, I got my vocational school certificate, even though I was college bound. And because I wanted a way to pay for school, but also I realized in retrospect that it helped to get a really good job because
Hmm.
it was sort of like a built-in internship. And then running my own vocational school and just the pride and the purpose that gave all of my students, I just thought we really need to have more vocational school options. And as you know, not every student is college bound,
Right.
right? And even those that are college bound, oftentimes they have no idea what they want to go to college for. They just know, it's going to college or getting a job, which is
Hmm.
not going to pay the bills. So I feel that schools need to do a better job. We have these precious youngsters for a very short period of time, right? K through 12. Why not fully prepare them for the workforce while we have them, right? And so most vocational schools are you can complete them in 6 months to 18 months. The majority of them. A few of them require 24 months, maybe a little longer, but the majority of them can be completed for those that are, junior, senior year in high school. And so my proposal is that we should be able to have all of our students, all of our graduates graduate not only with the high school diploma, but also with a vocational certificate so that they're fully workforce ready on day one.
Mm. I
And
love that. I actually have a senior in high school right now, and he's finishing up his second half of his senior year. And I'm like, maybe we should look into that. He is planning to go to college, but it
right.
wouldn't hurt. I feel like that senior year of high school anyway, most students are having a hard time finding a lot of purpose. At least my son, he's like, my bed has more purpose right now in the morning. He just doesn't, he's kind of over it. So the idea of making the goal of graduating from high school and getting a vocational certificate,
Would
that's
energize
brilliant.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those last 2 years for most students, they're not really working towards something new.
Hmm.
Most of them, unless you're like AP student, a lot
Right.
of the courses you're pretty much done. And so, why not utilize your time and our resources? Most states, I know in the state of Georgia, 50% of our budget, our school budget, goes to administration. Why not make sure that those resources are going to the students and
Mm.
ensuring that we're getting a good ROI, right, for our
Yeah.
investment? So
Gosh, that makes a lot of sense. Well, you've got my vote if I could give it.
wonderful. Yes, yes.
Well, that's awesome. Well, this has been so neat to hear about your life and your mission and everything you're doing moving forward with helping these kids. Please tell our audience where they can learn more about you and your program and also businesses that can take advantage of Interpret AI?
Definitely. So if you are a business or even someone that knows someone that needs interpreting services, interpretai.org. And it's just as it sounds, interpretai.org. And then for anyone that would like to follow my campaign, and also I have my books also on my campaign page, and that's drnelvalee.com. That's drnelvalee.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Nelva, so much. It's been such a pleasure to learn from you and to hear your faith choices and just how you have been able to navigate through life. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're
It was
welcome.
enjoyable.
Thank you. And to everyone who is listening, thank you for tuning in. If this story is inspirational to you, please share it with a friend. We want to have more women know about resources in making decisions in life, as well as finding inspiration from each other and what we have to offer. So thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Hey, CEOs, thank you so much for spending your time with me. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please let me know in a comment and a 5-star review. You could have the chance of being a featured review on an upcoming episode. Continue the conversation on Instagram at Call Me CEO Podcast. And remember, you are the boss.